by Robert Yellin, Yakimono Gallery. Thank you so much, Robert.
Hi, everyone.
Now, Robert, I was talking to you about this before we started, but I first interviewed you last year in
Wow.
August.
Wow.
And your video, that first interview, has been my most viewed video on YouTube.
Wow.
Almost over 2,000 views now.
Oh,
So there is a lot of interest in your wonderful stories about potters in Japan, about the heritage of Japanese pottery and ceramics. You've got so many great stories. I asked you how you would describe yourself. I would call you a curator, but you're much more than that. You're like a historian, a detective, an art lover. And you just described yourself to me as a song and dance man.
well, that's the retort that Dylan said when somebody asked him in the '60s, "You see yourself as a folk singer or a poet or a rock singer?" It's hard to label oneself. So a lot of people, put labels on me from the outside. This or that, and I'm like, oh, really? Okay, well, that kind of fits into the umbrella that I hold. But I'm not particularly a fan of labels. I'm just in search of beauty and trying to share that with people. And of course, when you look at Japanese ceramics, you better look at history. So yeah, there's historical aspect, historian aspect of it. But I'm like a treasure hunter, you know, trying to share that with people. Um, as I've said before, Japan has such great traditions, and we want to support living artists in this culture. And somebody that you might want to interview, Joy, his name is Steve Bymel, and he just started this award contest called Japan Craft 21, because so many of these crafts, or fine art, in fact, lacquerware, they're dying because of the changing population. And what I want to do in my own small way is to support living artists so that these traditions can continue, because they've inspired so many people throughout the centuries. It would be a shame if they disappeared, which many of them are on the verge of doing. So that's kind of my job as well, to support living artists. But anybody out there, go to Japan Crafts 21 and you can help support carpenters, glass artists, textile artists, lacquerware, any type of craft you can imagine. Japan Crafts 21 is trying to support. In my own small focus, it's on ceramics.
That's great. And I had the chance to visit your beautiful new studio last autumn. And you introduced me to so many interesting artists' work that you had on display in the gallery then. And I realized looking at your Instagram page recently that you have a lot of different collections that you move around, and so many different stories. At the moment, you have such an interesting collection from Yasuko Hoshi-Tada. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Yeah, so, I was introduced to her daughter, whose name is Maniko-san, via an art dealer in the Cleveland area named Michael Verne. So Michael Verne runs a print painting gallery focusing on Japanese art. The gallery's been around for about 60 years. So Michael contacted me and he said this lady has a garage full of boxes of ceramics and she doesn't know what they are or their value, and would you be interested to see and discuss and possibly represent them? And I said, sure. So I got in touch with Maniko, and she would send me files and files and files of photos, JPEGs, a very, quite frankly, mixed collection that her mother created. But there were some very choice pieces, which I have a catalog of. If anybody would like it, they can just email me at robert@japanesepottery.com. I'm happy to share the catalog of the pieces that I selected, and I'll show you some of them in a moment. One of them is going to be going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, so that's kind of the top of the selection that she had. And Yasuko Tada, she was born Yasuko Hoshi, and her father was a pretty well-known person named Hoshi-Hajime. And he went
Robert,
to...
can I just ask you to get a little bit closer to the mic? It's a little hard to hear.
Sure. Hold on.
Thank
Let me
you.
move this box.
Thank you.
How about if I do this? I'll take the camera and I'll just put it here. Maybe a little too close. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Gosh, I'm so scruffy. So the father was named Hoshi-Hajime, and he was a rare Japanese individual in that around 1902, 1904, he went and studied at Columbia University in New York. So he came back to Japan with a lot of knowledge about overseas politics and medicine, and he became like the drug lord of the Taisho 1920s, 1930s, and started a pharmaceutical company called Hoshi Pharmaceutical Company, and then also founded something called the Hoshi University. So they were a well-heeled family with lots of connections. But around 1960, Yasuko-san moved to New York, and her daughter Maniko-san was born there. But every summer they would come back and visit Japan, and Maniko would be left with the grandmother, the doting grandmother, and Yasuko-san would travel throughout Japan visiting these various artists. And they were the who's who of the Mingei world, the folk craft world. So she was friends with Hamada Shoji, she was friends with Shimoka Tatsuzo, she was friends with the Kawai family here in Kyoto, and they exchanged lots of correspondences, letters, and postcards. So I got those letters and postcards too, and it's amazing to see a letter from 1961 addressed to Yasuko-san in New York City by Yanagi Soetsu, the founder of the Mingei movement, advising the mother how to name the daughter. So the daughter didn't even know about the content of this letter. So I showed her the letter. I'm saying, look, Yanagi Soetsu is advising your mother on the kanji to name you. And look, here's money, and here's money. And I'm going, this letter is so important because it shows how you were named. So, this discovery that we're sharing with her. And so, I selected these pieces over a number of months. I've given the letters to the Kawai family, and I will present letters and correspondences to the Kaneshige family. So in Bizen, the most famous family is the Kaneshige family, and the first living national treasure of Bizen was Kaneshige Toyo. He passed away in 1967. And in the not only the letters, but these life photos that Maniko-san sent me, there's a photo of her as a little girl with her older brother at the Kaneshige family house. So it must be 1966 or so. And these are treasured photographs that show a relationship in time of this woman, Yasuko-san, and how she approached and shared Japanese ceramics and collected them. The unfortunate thing, though, is that, like many people, they don't talk about the past. Maniko-san was never really told about these pieces, who made them, how they were obtained, and so on. So, for example, we have a Noguchi Isamu mask, which is, an incredible piece of historical art that he made in 1952 when he visited the Kaneshige family. And we've found, I've been finding out about these other masks because there's a press mold, and then maybe about 7 or 8 of these masks were made and then presented to the Kaneshige family. So she must have gotten it either from Kaneshige or from Noguchi himself, but we're not sure. It's kind of a mystery. So that's the prime piece in the collection. There's some other interesting works I can walk over and show you in a minute. But yeah, I'm very honored to be able to share the story of this incredible family and Maniko's generosity to share with me her life story, because it's very personal. And, there's a lot of emotions, obviously, that are involved when a parent passes away and you're letting go of things that they've lovingly acquired over their lifetime. So one of the reasons she contacted me via Michael is that she didn't want just the local recycle center to get them, or to put them up on eBay or places like that where there'd just be these shark hunters trying to get a bargain or this. I told her there's a really important story around these works, and just to put them up on the net without the story is dishonoring your mother. So we want to honor your mother and the friendships that she cultivated over the years, and that's what we did.
And you have such great connections to the local pottery families that you've actually been going back and forth with some of the families, asking them if they can place some of the pieces and doing a bit of detective work to deepen the story about these pieces, which I find so fascinating, so interesting.
It is, and I'm in awe. I'm in awe all the time. I'm basically in constant awe. We're doing this. The sun rises. Like I'm in constant awe. But yeah, I showed the letters to the Kaneshige family, and they were like amazed. There was even one postcard addressed to Toyo's younger son. I mean, not addressed to, but written by Toyo's younger son, first son, called Michiaki Sensei. He's in heaven now. But he wrote to Yasuko-san about how he was doing woodblock prints as like a hobby. And the family never knew that. So I showed the postcards, obviously, and they're like, this is amazing. We now discovered something about our, I showed them to one of the family members named Kaneshige Junpei, who is Michiaki's nephew. And he studied in Brooklyn. He's got a great Instagram page, Kaneshige Junpei. And Junpei told his father, Michiaki's brother, and they were amazed. They discovered something new about their family member that they never knew via this one postcard. So I'm going to be going down to Bizen within a couple of weeks or so and present them with these correspondences. I think the family should have them. The same goes for the Hamada family. Hamada Shoji was probably the most famous Japanese potter outside of Japan ever, one of the founding members of the folk craft movement, and also a living national treasure. And there's lots of correspondences between the family as well. And if you get the catalog, you'll see some of these personal photos from them. I also researched about these masks. So it seems that only the Kaneshige family has them. And so I went in search of them. So I went out to Mie Prefecture, where Kaneshige Moto lives. He's the youngest of 8 children of Kaneshige Toyo, and he has a mask. Then I went to Kameoka, which is right outside of Kyoto, and I found a mask in the collection of Deguchi Koitaro. And the Deguchi family are cousins of the Kaneshige family, and they started a religion based on art called the Omoto Foundation. So if you go online, Oomoto, that's his last name. And, they were like some of the movements or religions founded in the 20th century. They were based on bringing uplifting spirit to humanity through art. And your connections with art and those connections with supreme beings, if you want to call them, or just simply nature. So he has a mask. So I went down there to see it. And there's another mask, actually, Joy, in Hiroshima. Another one of the cousins has a mask. So I'm going to go down there when I'm able to as well, to still see how, the connections are between this.
Oh, I wonder if I could accompany you if you're in Hiroshima and just take photos and observe and be in awe of what you're doing.
That'd be fantastic. And then I want you to take me to your favorite okonomiyaki restaurant.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So I think I'm showing the mask now. Noguchi Isamu, is it?
Correct.
And you were saying in the Instagram video that you did about having it made from a mold, and you were investigating the mold in that different families have. That was
Yeah.
interesting.
I'm going to run across the room and grab a book. Hold on.
Okay.
I'll be right back. So this is a really important book in my field. It was written by the esteemed scholar Louise Court. It's called Isamu Noguchi and Modern Japanese Ceramics, A Close Embrace of the Earth. So Louise Court has written many, many books about Asian ceramics, in particular Japanese ceramics. And on the cover of this book is one of the masks and the famous Walk of Mr. Samsa by Yagi Kazuo, one of the founders of the very important Kyoto Sodesha movement, founded after World War II, that turned Japanese ceramics world upside down because everything they made was non-functional. It was very sculptural. And this particular piece was named after a character in a Kafka novel, Metamorphosis. So, it really expanded how ceramics were viewed, not just as a functional rice bowl, but now something, artistic and sculptural. So it was a very important piece. So on this book, that's what we see. And then it talks about the life of Noguchi, who, of course, many of you know, was an incredible artist, a great link between the East and West. He was born to a Japanese father and I believe an American mother, and came to Japan in the 1950s and stayed with the famous artist Rosanjin in Kamakura. And Rosanjin knew the Kaneshige family, so they went down to the studio and worked there in 1952. And Noguchi made the mold, so that white piece at the top, that's the actual mold. And you would impress clay into the mold, pull out the finished piece, then kind of carve it a bit, and then you get this piece.
Now,
So
this seems in real contrast to the whole Mingei movement, because Mingei is kind of practical folk art. It wasn't really intended to be art. It was intended for use. But this is not for use. This is for decoration. This is art, right?
very, very much so. It's as far away as Mingei as you can get. It's sculpture. It's for display. But this one guy in Hiroshima, he said when he was a little boy, it kind of scared him. So he would shoot, like BB gun darts at it or something. It was like, no, that's not what you should do with that. But it seems that the piece was given as presents to the Kaneshige family for their kindness to Noguchi. And one of the interesting things also is that it's not signed. There are very few ceramic pieces in existence. He mostly worked in stone and, of course, washi paper with his famous akari. But some of the ceramic pieces actually have the hiragana of no signed on them because he was actually there in the studio when they were drying. But he gave the mold to the Kaneshige family. One of the brothers told me that Michiaki is the person who pressed the special Bizen clay into the mold, pulled it out and carved it, and then they fired about 7 or 8, as I said, and somewhere months later, Noguchi went or they were shipped back, and that's how they got them. So that's why they're not signed with that.
That's so interesting. And you mentioned that this piece is not the one on the cover, even though it looks like it. It's made from the same mold, but it's not the identical piece, is it?
Exactly. Let me run across the room again. I'll get the mask.
Okay.
Okay. Keep talking, Joy.
All right. So if you haven't followed Robert's Instagram page or Facebook page or seen his website, he has so much information there. He also has an older website, which is like an amazing glossary of everything ceramic and pottery in Japan that you would ever want to search for. You can also see Robert's articles that he's written over the years on that linked website. So I'll put those links below. Definitely.
Thank you.
So you're holding the mask.
Yes, and thank you for the information to folks. Yes. So, the clay is this very special Bizen clay that the Kaneshige family has. You can see on the mask I'm holding, for example, there's a little white stone burst on the nose there. Oh, and on the cover, you'll notice that it's not there. So even though they're the exact same mold, there are subtle differences in the thickness of the piece, the way the ear is in a subtle way.
Yeah, a little bit different.
Slightly different. So,
And you said this piece is designated for the Metropolitan Gallery in New York, is it?
we are in discussions, basically in the final discussions. Noguchi, he has his museum out in, I think, Long Island, the Noguchi Foundation. And they, at the Met, have many pieces of Noguchi, and he actually made a water fountain in the Japanese section of the museum, but they don't have any ceramics. So this would be the first ceramic piece they would get. And yeah, we're in the final stages of sending this out. I'm working with a shipping company right now, and the wonderful kind of circle of life, so to speak, is that Maniko, who now lives in New York, now lives in California. She was born in New York, and right around the corner from the Met. And she said when she was a little girl, she would go splash in the fountains and pick up coins because she didn't have any money to go buy a cheeseburger or something. And so it's a wonderful homecoming of sorts that this mask is fully circling the globe from Bizen to Tokyo to New York to California, back to Japan, and now its final resting piece, so to speak, so that people can enjoy forever, as long as we're around as humans, at the Met. It's fantastic.
Yeah, really exciting. You also had another interesting piece that came from your gallery and is now in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So you've got all these wider connections than you realize with the work that you've been doing in Japan over these years. It's wonderful. It must be so exciting to see that happen.
It's very exciting and humbling, because it's not about me. I'm just trying to share these stories of these amazing craftspeople, artists, potters, ceramic artists, whatever label. Uh, I'm just a little window into this fascinating world. And when a piece ends up in a museum, of course, the artists are incredibly grateful and honored. They put that on their todeki, their ceramic history paper. And so, like so many things in Japan, once something becomes accepted overseas, a lot of Japanese kind of reflect on what they have. And so hopefully that'll be happening with the ceramic art as well. But yeah, the downside, though, of having a tea bowl in a museum is that it's like a prisoner because it's supposed to be held, it's supposed to be used, it's supposed to be caressed and appreciated. And when it's behind a glass window in a case, it's like this famous writer said about a tea bowl in a glass window. It's like having this intense itch that you cannot scratch. It's very frustrating. But at least people who view it can go online, contact me. They can get a piece by the artist, and that itch will be alleviated. But yeah, it's this beautiful red fire dancing tea bowl by Yamada Kazu, and he's based out in Fukui in Echizen.
Yeah, gorgeous. Let's go back a little bit to that difference between the Mingei folk art and being an artist and signing your work. You had
Hmm.
a really interesting example. Is it Tomikichi who broke from the Mingei movement because Tomimoto Kenkichi because he wanted to sign his work as an artist? I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, well, this movement, you always have somebody at the top of any movement. And the Mingei Katsudo, or the folk craft movement, the founding member, the leader, the guy who set the rules was Yanagi Soetsu. And as I mentioned, he was friends with Yasuko Hoshi. But he had, very demanding ways of how his movement will be approached. And one of them was you won't sign your work. And Tomimoto, an incredible artist with brushwork of, intense skill and divinity. He said, malarkey, I'm an artist, I'm going to sign my work. And over the years, he had so many different signatures on his pieces. So he just left. I mean, that's one of the reasons. I don't know if there was a clash of personalities or they had some words between them. I don't know. But what I do know is that Yanagi said you can't sign your work. So that's why Hamada, in his early years, there are some rare pieces where Hamada Shoji actually has a stamp. Kawai Kanjiro, in his early years, had a stamp too. But after the Mingei movement was founded in the 20s, then that no longer was part of what they did. And one of my utmost favorite Mashiko potters, of course, the Mashiko style of pottery up in Tochigi Prefecture, north of Tokyo, where Hamada lived, was a guy named Murata Gen. And Murata Gen studied with Hamada Shoji and is my personal favorite. But he was ostracized by the folk craft movement. You don't see any of his work at the Folk Craft Museum in Tokyo because he signed his work. Even though it's all functional work, it's beautiful tea bowls and sake vessels and flower vases. But, he wanted to sign his work. So he was ostracized, blacklisted, so to speak.
That's really interesting. You also mentioned the mystery, the Bizen mystery, that you have some of plates that you're not sure, maybe because they're not signed, who made them or where they're made, and you're in communication with the Kaneshige family to try to work out. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So those little plates are right here. And the only kiln studio that we know that Yasuko-san visited was the Kaneshige family. And they're so professionally well thrown. The Kaneshige family thinks the father might have done them as like just quick one-offs as gifts. So when I do go down to visit the family, I will be taking these with me.
Yeah. And you do have some which must be signed. You have a Kaneshige Toyo Bizen jar. Is that
Well, yeah, he did sign his work with a little kind of a line with a little edge on the side.
like a katakana to?
Exactly. So,
Beautiful.
and he changed the toe over the years, and you can actually, I have a book I can show you that shows the different variations. This one's kind of thick and stubby, and this one is kind of slender and longer.
Oh, yeah.
So they were made at different periods. And this is actually, where's a Tomimoto piece? This is a Bernard Leach piece.
Yeah, that was interesting stories about the plate and the with the ship on it as well.
Unfortunately, it broke. It is low-fired raku ware, and there's a similar piece in the museum in Moscow. It says Bernard Leach Fessed Islands of Enchantment, made by, and of course the Islands of Enchantment refer to Japan and England, where Bernard Leach is from. And on the ship, there's this christening of it called Nancy Bell, which somebody at the Crafts Study Center in Britain showed me was from a poem from 1866. There's a line in it with this name, Nancy Bell. Unfortunately, the ship got shipwrecked and led to cannibalism, which is really wild. And then on the back of the plate, here's a nice letter somebody wrote me, is the year it was made.
Wow.
1919.
Wow, that is really old. Look at you holding it with your bare hand.
I've held so much pottery that I'm very comfortable. And people are always, well, gosh, it's so expensive, like this beautiful teacup by Kawai Kanjiro. Oh, I don't want to pick it up. Well, if you're conscious and your mind is present, then nothing will happen. It's when you drift off into other thoughts
Yeah.
that you might, trip or, hit it on the kitchen sink. But these pieces bring consciousness into your moment, and then they will bring you great, great joy. Nobody's nervous when they're holding an eraser, and if it breaks, it breaks. That's the fate of the work. But
Let's
the beauty comes through using it. That's called yo no bi. This cup has
definitely.
that
And
that,
that's similar to what you said about it being a prisoner in a museum. That
that
it's sad that it's not in use, that it's not in the world being loved.
exactly. It's loved in a different way, but it's not loved in the way the potter intended it to be loved. So yeah, in that respect, it's true. Um,
Now let's talk about what you have been doing for pieces that are damaged in all the shipping around the world. So you mentioned a few pieces had been repaired. You have a local kintsugi expert who helps you with that. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a couple of people I use. Thankfully, no pieces break when we send them, so that's a good thing. We're very careful, obviously, with packing. And Chihiro gets fan letters for her packing. It's amazing. It's an artwork, and she's a true artist. So, yeah, nothing gets broken from our transit. Now, what happens on the other side, I don't know. I mean, I had a client once who loved to, and I probably told you this story before, but he loved to see his favorite Unomi teacup in the morning sitting on the windowsill, greeting him for another day, the shadow, the sunlight streaming through. And one day he dropped it and it broke into a few pieces. I got this email, I could sense the tears. And I said, Chuck, don't worry about it. Just send it back. I'll have Mr. Takahashi do his magic. So he sent it back. We had it kintsugi-ized, and there was these threads of gold. And we sent it back to Chuck, and he was overwhelmed with joy. He said, "This is amazing. I'm going to break everything I have so I can have more kintsugi." And I advised him against that because there are people now. Kintsugi is very popular in the world, and people intentionally break pieces. I don't think that's a good idea unless you want to practice on a cheap piece about how to make kintsugi for your own, attempts. Everything has its own fate, just like people. So I neglect to advise against that. But yes, there's an interesting book, Joy. I'm just going to walk over here.
So for
Uh,
anybody who doesn't know, kintsugi is basically repair using gold. And you can see in the picture I'm showing right now, this cup has been repaired with an expert hand. This is not a novice doing this. This beautiful piece of pottery has been beautifully repaired with gold.
yes, it has. And a local lady who sometimes we ask to do kintsugi just came out with this beautiful book. It's got a urushi cover, and it's like a sutra book, and it's bilingual, and it's about the history and how to do kintsugi. It's called Kintsugi in the Cycle of Nature, a meditation on Japanese lacquer arts. And her name is, oh, her, thanks, Shimon. Yeah, world, thank you. Her name is Mio Heki, and here's a photo of her.
That's gorgeous. And it folds out accordion style, kind
Yeah,
of like the temple books, right?
exactly, exactly. It's like a sutra book,
Yeah.
masterfully illustrated, beautifully photographed, and wonderful text
Oh, that's gorgeous.
in both English and Japanese. So there's two covers. This is a lacquer cover, and then there's one with a cloth cover with the motif of a lacquer tree leaf.
Oh.
So anyway, kintsugi is incredibly popular right now, but you should let that all happen naturally. You don't want to interfere with the cycle of anything, if that can be helped.
Yeah, you let the pottery break if it's its time, and
Exactly.
then move from there. Let's talk about that Kawai Kanjiro piece that you were just showing, because you said that's one of the most significant pieces in the collection. Is that right?
Yeah, let me go back. Kawai Kanjiro was, and still is, because his spirit is alive. You can sense his spirit when you go visit his house. I never met him because he passed away in 1966, and he was a very humble man. He declined to be designated as a living treasure. The Japanese government said, "We want you to be a national treasure," and he politely declined. And I think one of the reasons was that it's too much of a burden for some people to have that responsibility, because he wants to work. He wants, to be kissed and dance with the muses every day. And if you take on that government designation, you're obligated to have, a parade of visitors all the time. When do you work? You can't work. It has to be in the middle of the night. And he has a house in Kyoto called the Kawai Kanjiro House, and it's highly recommended for anybody who visits Kyoto, even if you're not interested in the ceramic art, but to see how one man's life was set up to revolve around his work. And an amazing artist, Kawai Kanjiro. I'm going to turn this around again. Hold on. Got this.
The piece is beautiful. And you also introduced some of the sake cups, which are unusual because he wasn't a sake drinker. Is that
He
right?
wasn't. And so they're very rare to come by. Um, Four of them will be going to England and will probably end up in a museum. But he was a glaze master. Even in college, he went to ceramic vocational school. He was known as a master of glazes. Even in his early 20s, he did thousands and thousands of tests on different glazes. And one of his most famous is a cobalt blue, which you often see. And this one is called a Doro Hakame. So he before he glazed it with the cobalt blue, he took this white liquid clay and kind of like finger painted on the top of the body. So that's where you get this relief texture from. And then he also used it with a slip trail, this white glaze, but instead of just finger painting it on, he precisely drew a flower motif. It's kind of like a pixie or something out of Fantasia. It's like putting icing on a cake. So you have this device, a tube, and then you just squeeze out the liquid clay. And this is one of his famous motifs on both sides. Very alive.
Gorgeous.
He was amazing. I can't tell you how much in awe of him I am. And there's a book in English that he wrote. It's called "We Do Not Work Alone." So he was always drawing on higher energy, and he knew that his skill was important, but there were elements outside of your own ability, like what happens in the kiln, that bring a piece to a first round exhibition, or ends up in the shard pile. He also did in his early years, he did replicas of ancient Chinese wares. And like from the Tang Dynasty, there's something called neriage, which is a marbled effect. So this is an early Kawai Kanjiro bowl in that realm.
That's gorgeous. And he also adopted, or his son-in-law took the Kauai name, and you have a
Correct.
piece of his work there, right?
Right. This is one of them. His name is Kawai Hirotsugu. And Kawai-san only had a daughter, so the daughter married this gentleman. He became a yoshi, or an adopted son, and worked in the Kawai style. And he has three daughters, and they are all running the Kawai family house right now. So the family had wonderful foresight to keep the house just as it was when he lived there. So when you walk into the house, there's basically nothing that's been changed. you expect Kawai Kanjiro to return in a couple of minutes after he goes, buy a pack of tofu or something. So this is the son. Also made some wonderful work. I'm just trying to see if there's any others in my site right now, but this is the only one I can see that he made, Kawai Hirotsugu. And it has a little rope on the top here, so you could actually hang this on your wall.
Nice. And
Yeah.
I think you have a bowl on the upper level as well. Is that from Kawaii as
Um,
well? With
well,
different colors?
this one, I'm sorry to go so fast.
Mm.
No, it might be in the back. Some of the
Oh,
pieces.
okay. Yep.
Yeah, this is in Kawai Kanjiro's later years. He was doing this tricolor ink splash, a glaze splash, kind of like action painting. So
Yeah.
it's red and green and black. Sometimes it comes a brownish color.
Yeah, I'm showing
And,
it on screen right now. I got it from your Instagram live.
okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Beautiful.
An inkstone. So if you happen to be a practitioner of shodo calligraphy, you might want an inkstone.
Yeah, that's
And then,
gorgeous.
another interesting couple of pieces in the collection are these two slab Bizen plates with this stick figure on it. And they were made by a man named J.B. Blunk, B-L-U-N-K. And J.B. Blunk was the first foreign apprentice of the Kaneshige, and most likely in Bizen of all time. So he knew Noguchi and Rosanjin. There's a neat photo of him that you can find on Google Images of J.B. Blunk with Rosanjin and Noguchi in the 1950s. So Noguchi introduced J.B. Blunk to Kaneshige Toyo, and J.B. Blunk became his apprentice. Very minimalistic, primitive type of slab. So these might return to the J.B. Blunk Foundation. We're not sure yet.
That's really interesting. There's a lot of males, men in the series, but you had a really interesting two neck piece from a female artist,
Yes,
Takaezu Toshiko. Is that right?
that is correct. So I just happen to have this book here about Takeizu Toshiko. And let me put the camera down and reverse it again.
Oh, look at that.
She was, I don't know her exact bio, but she worked out of Hawaii. And that's her spelling of her name. And in the 1950s, she too came to Japan and worked at the Kaneshige family kiln. It's kind of like that. And she was an incredibly talented ceramic artist, making these kind of, I don't know, not cylindrical, but like a dango, elongated dango. And so in the collection, there is that piece that was slightly damaged, not because of us, but somewhere down the road. And so there's a couple of Kintsugi repairs on it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the piece has been packed and is going off to a client who actually wrote the book.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
that's
really exciting, isn't it?
That's very exciting. And the other exciting thing, Joy, is that Maniko found another one. So there's still boxes in the garage that she's still opening. So I'm going to get, hopefully, the other Takeizu Toshiko work. Let me see if I can find a photo of her in Bizen. I don't want to take too much time just flipping through the book. No, there's not many photos of her. But you can obviously go online and find her name. An incredibly important connection between the East and West in the 20th century. I never met her, and it's the first piece I've actually held by her from the Hoshi-Tada collection. But I've always been a fan of her work. Just gorgeous forms and glazes. So yeah, that's a neat piece. And hopefully,
Absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, hopefully, like I said, I'll be getting another one in the coming weeks.
Now, some of the other mysteries, for example, there was a coffee cup by a potter who his family never knew he ever made a coffee cup.
Yeah, yeah, that's the Kaneshige Toyo. So I've never seen one. They've never seen one. So the theory is that because Yasuko was an amateur potter, she made jewelry, and the theory is that Toyo was showing her how to put a handle on a piece. So it's a coffee cup with a handle, but it's the only one anybody's ever seen.
Yeah, so interesting. So you have some of the pieces in this collection which are for sale, for private sales,
They
and
all
then
are.
oh, they all are.
Yeah,
So even the ones going to the museums.
yeah. I'm representing the collection from my gallery.
That's wonderful. It's so interesting how you make all these connections to potters and the families in Japan, but you're also making connections to galleries and dealers and collectors around the world, right?
Appears to be.
Uh, there was a interesting Funaki Kenji plate with a bird on it.
Yeah.
Still have
So
that?
yeah, I do. And the reason I asked to get this is because on the back it says Funaki Michitada, who was Kenji's father, and whose pieces are very rare. And so I thought this designation was correct. Isn't that cute?
That's really cute. So
So
there's such a variety in styles in this collection.
yeah, so this is a Mingei family down in Shimane. And so I contacted Kenji's son because in the photographs that I was sent, there's a photo of Funaki Kenji and another potter named Takeuchi Seiichiro in an exhibition that Yasuko took. And I was calling the family to verify that this was actually made by Funaki Michitada. But the son of Kenji, I'm sorry, I forget his name offhand, but he said, no, that's my father's work. It's not my grandfather. So they were not, they thought it was somebody, but it turns out to be somebody else, of course, of the same family. But he was known for drawing different animals and birds on plates.
Nice.
Funaki Kenji.
And
Yeah,
the other plate that you had, I think next to it, Shimaoka Tatsuzo, is it?
yeah, yeah. Shimoka Tatsuzo was a great ambassador of clay in the from 1970 on until his passing around 2006. He traveled to the United States to visit um, the Yasuko's family. So I talked to Shimoka's daughter a couple of months ago, trying to find out more of the connections between the family, and she said, "Yeah, um, when when 311 hit, Shimoka was in New York. He was supposed to give a lecture at the Japan Society." And so, of course, the world was turned upside down, and Yasuko-san was in New York at that time and was very, very concerned about his well-being and taking care of him. So she really looked after him. And the daughter said that, Shimoka was eternally thankful for that. Shimoka Tatsuzo was Hamada Shoji's number one apprentice. He went on to be designated as a living national treasure for his Mingei folk craft, but in particular his use of rope cords that he rolled onto his work that looked like ancient Jomon pottery. And the connection between Jomon And his work is that his father was a cord maker. So Hamada always said, find a motif that you can put on your pot to identify it. That's kind of your signature, because you can't sign the pieces. Although in the end, Shimoka did stamp a lot of his work with ta, the katakana for ta, hiragana for ta, maybe after Yanagi died and was no longer to be the, Mingei Police Academy there or whatever. So you want? I'll go get the. Well, I'll walk you over again. Let's go take another walk.
Sounds good. You also have a couple, like it looks like a ceramic bottle or a little pot that's made, I think, by Shimaoka-san.
Yeah, Shimoka is the most represented in the collection because he was, lived longer and worked obviously more. So Yasuko-san went and visited him quite a lot. This is a very pure example of that Jomon rope design. So when the clay is still wet, he would roll these cords over and then fill in the lines with white clay. Here's another example of a Shimoka plate. And then these beautiful little bottles. He also did lots of red and green enamel overglaze. And you can even see the cords on these sake flasks. A little subtle on that one. And beautiful ash glaze with a salt glaze here. So these are rope cords. And they're basically on all of his work, this lovely Unomi, a smaller sake cup celebrating his 77th birthday, and then another small bottle.
And
Yes.
the glaze colors are so bright and beautiful.
Yeah, so varying. Yeah, he was a master and a great teacher. Many of his apprentices are now well regarded around the world. His number one apprentice is a man named Matsuzaki Ken, who has a worldwide following, shows in Boston and in the UK a lot. One of the first potters that I wrote about in my Japan Times column a long time ago, Matsuzaki Ken. And Shimoka, even though he had apprentices, it was like a workshop basically. But he would always answer the phone himself. I would call him up and I needed a box or, get an exhibition catalog. And he was always just the gentleman on the phone, a real gentleman country potter, a country gentleman potter. Yeah.
Now, can you mention a little bit about the boxes? Because when I visited you, you talked about how important that is for
Yeah.
authenticity and how some of these pieces do not have boxes, but the family of the artist is willing to do a box that's signed and you can do a certification. Is that right?
That's correct. So, for example, this is a beautiful and classic Hamada Shoji teacup, and his motif was a sugar millet. But it doesn't have a box. And the family will first they look at it. Each family is different. Each family has their own policy. The Hamada family will charge you just to look at the piece because everybody wants to think they own a Hamada. And if the family just looked at it, they'd be wasting a lot of hours every day. And then if the piece is authentic, they'll charge you a certain amount to sign the box. And the person signing the box now is Hamada's son, who's in his 90s. So that's not going to last a whole lot longer. Then the grandson will sign it. The Kawai family is the same. So these pieces do not have boxes. But I've taken them, and I can pretty much tell myself. But it's nice to have a family member do the box writing. And you get further down away from the original maker, the price kind of drops a little bit as well. So now, after Kawai Kanjiro passed away, his wife signed the boxes. Then the wife passed away and the daughter signed the boxes. The daughter passed away and now the husband of one of the granddaughters signs the boxes, who is the director of the museum.
Wow.
So the piece itself obviously is the same,
Yeah.
but the value is somewhat decreased the farther you get away from the original person's box.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. But I think that has carried over to Japanese culture, respecting the box that products come in. Don't you think? I see that a lot here.
Well, packaging everything. I mean, even if you go to the department store, a couple of sticks of dango are pretty well packaged. So presentation is very important. But with the boxes too, they serve a purpose because a lot of this art was rotated according to the seasons, and so you would want something to put it in to protect it as well, and to authenticate it. Because there are fakes, replicas of these artists, and so the artist wants to make sure that down history that their work is known as theirs and not a copy. Although there are copies of Kawai Kanjiro boxes and Hamada Shoji boxes, so yeah, be careful. It's a tricky world, so you have to find a respected and trustworthy dealer to associate yourself with, and
Definitely. Someone like you who knows the business and knows the artist. We have a comment from Molly in the US. She says, as a potter, I've always admired the time and patience it takes to create some of the patterns and designs of Japanese pottery. Wonderful.
incredible. So I know we're kind of approaching the end, but today on Instagram, I put a photo of this giant kutani platter, and talking
Wow.
about the time and effort it makes to create the patterns. This is an ajiro weaving pattern. You usually see these on the roofs of skiya style um, dwellings, very tea house style. So each one of these lines is hand drawn, and
Oh
it
my
goes
gosh.
into various gradations of color. Kutani is one of the great porcelains of Japan, and it has 5 pigment colors that they're known for. And this man's grandfather was one of the great innovators of Kutani pigments, and he kept a secret code book. All of these pigment recipes were in code, and he would not share these. So when you look at pieces from the Tokuda family, they're pretty easily recognizable. And he told his grandson, when you become a potter, take these recipes and keep them safe and hidden, because if you have the recipes for these pigments, you'll never go hungry.
Wow. Look how precise and beautifully balanced that design is. It must have taken an eternity. There must be imperfect versions out there somewhere.
Uh, uh, if they are, they're probably in the shard pile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Perfectionists, right?
yeah. Yeah, somebody just commented, Richard. Yeah, Phil Rogers was a great um, ambassador as well. He unfortunately passed away recently, and I was in touch with him a few times. Yeah, so Phil Rogers was a British potter. Richard just commented, who made his own wonderful pottery and was a great, great champion of sharing the beauty of Hamada Shoji. So thank you for that comment, Richard.
Yeah. Are there any other pieces outside of this wonderful collection that we haven't talked about you'd like to touch on?
Um,
We have about 3 more minutes.
yeah, so another odd style um, is from Sado Island.
Oh, I love Sado Island. I haven't been yet, but I've seen so many amazing pictures.
Yeah, I've never been either, and I always want to go to the Earth Festival there with the
Yeah.
kodo drumming. But there's a family there named the Ito family, and there are 5 generations. There are going to be 6 generations, and they're known for their black and red smoked work.
Look at that. That's
And
interesting.
I have a really big piece in the other room, but this is easier to show. And this was made by a man named Ito Seksui, who is a 5th generation and was designated a living national treasure for it's called Mumyo Yaki, and it's kind of a rare style. So we'll end on rarity.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this the first time and when I visited your studio as well, how the prices are not cheap. But you talked about how even cheaper pottery that you might find in some places, you find a connection to, that it's finding a connection to different pieces. It's not only about the price or the value or the famous person who made it, that there's some kind of deeper connection to the pieces. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, if you only look at something, that's why in my gallery nothing is labeled. Everything is marked somewhere on the base. But I want people to come here and look with their heart, not their knowledge. And yeah, pottery, you can find great pieces for 15, $20, 2,000, 3,000 yen. There are many artists making incredible, beautiful, functional work. And then on the other side, the flip side, there are well-known people who've had a long career and their work is incredibly expensive, but no thank you. It's not for me. It's not the name. It's not the price. It's something how you connect with it, how you want to live with it. And yeah, okay, so you'll spend maybe a couple $100, to 20, 30, 40,000 yen on a teacup or a sake cup, but you're going to treasure it all your life. People spend that on clothes and shoes and, they don't think twice about it. But this is something, that you become intimate with. It enriches your daily life on many levels, not only just the viewing of it, but functional pieces as it nourishes your body and your spirit. And in the long run, that's going to be worth every penny that you bought, that you put into this piece that you will cherish your whole life. And the beautiful thing is, too, somebody else in the future will as well. Our human conditions and environments change, but we all need a drink. We all like to look at flowers, and a lot of people like to live with various art forms, sculptural. So you look at a 12,000, 13,000-year-old Jomon pot, and it moves you today. What do people live with today that's going to move the spirit of another human? Basically, same conditions of being a human. Maybe things will change with what surrounds us, but the mystery of life and the beauty of daily living is will never change. We all want to hold something to put our food in and our liquids in. And those are the moments in my life, these simple moments that bring me great joy. Joy.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful place to leave it for today. And I would love to have you back every time you have a new collection that you'd like to introduce. I would love to have these talks with you more regularly. It's such a fascinating dive into Japanese heritage and culture and art and connection, not only around Japan, but also around the world. So it's so fantastic. Thank you so much, Robert.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on your show. Be well, everybody. Play safe. Kansha always.
Kansha, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. And next week, I have a few talks later in the week. I'm doing a trip to Kamikatsu, one of my favorite places to study sustainability and new ideas in Japan. So please join me on some live walk in talks around Kamikatsu next week. And then we have interviews from next Thursday and Friday, talking with TerraCycle and Loop about their new concept that they're launching in Tokyo to reuse all of their containers, which is very exciting. Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Take care.